Hello, welcome to the self-learning platform by Dr. Sushma Singh. Today we start Unit 15, Karl Marx, and our topic is dialectical. Marx borrowed his dialectical method from Hegel, but modified it in the fundamental way. While Hegel had applied his dialectical method in the domain of ideas, Marx applied the dialectical to explain the material conditions of life. In the process of doing so, he denounced the Hegelian philosophy of dialectical idealism on the one hand and the theory of mechanistic materialism on the other. Hence, the Marxian theory of society and history may be called dialectical materialism. In fact, Engels, in his anti-Durkheim, applied the dialectics even to physical nature. This has become a subject of intense debate among the Marxian dialectical materialism developed by Engels has three dimensions. First, the law of transformation of quantity into quality. It means that quantitative changes lead to qualitative revolutionary situation. The law of unity of opposite and the law of negation, thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. Marx holds that the material and the ideal are not only different but opposite and constitute a unity in which the material is primary and the mind is secondary. This is so because matter can exist without mind, but mind cannot exist without matter. Because historically, if mind has developed out of matter, in this way, Marx completely inverted the Hegelian position. You would recall that Hegel mind was primary and the matter secondary. Marx pointed out that with Hegel, dialectics is standing on its head. It must be turned right side up. This he did by making matter primary and mind secondary. Next topic is theory of historical materialism. The most seminal contribution of Marx is his theory of historical materialism. In his Socialism, Utopian and Scientific, Engels defined historical materialism as a theory which holds that the ultimate cause which determines the whole course of human history is the economic development of society. The whole course of human history is explained in terms of changes occurring in the modes of production and exchange. Starting with primitive communalism, the mode of production has passed through three stages: slavery, feudalism, and capitalism, and the consequent division of society into distinct classes: slave, master, serf, Spartan, and proletariat capitalist, and the struggle of these classes against one another. The most profound statement of Marx, which explains his theory of historical materialism, is contained in his preface to the contribution to the critique of political economy. In this work, Marx contends that the economic structure of society constituted by its relations of production is the real foundation of society. It is the basis on which rises a legal and political superstructure and to which correspond definite form of social consciousness. Along with it, the society's relation of production themselves correspond to the definitive stage of development of its material productive forces. Thus, the mode of production of material life determines the social, political, and intellectual life process in general. The general relation as well as form of state are to be grasped neither from themselves nor from the so-called general development of human mind, but rather they have their roots in the material conditions of life. As the society's productive forces develop, animate energy getting replaced by inanimate energy. For example, oxen plowing getting replaced by plowing with tractor. They clash with the existing relations of production, which become a fetter on their further growth. Thus begins the epoch of social revolution. This contradiction between forces of production and relations of productions divides the society into classes. As people become conscious of their conflict, they fight it out. The conflict is resolved in favor of the productive forces and new, high relations of production whose material conditions have matured in the womb of the old society emerge. The bourgeois mode of production not only represents the most recent of several progressive epochs, but it is the last antagonist form of production. Marx's materialist interpretation of history thus explains the general course of human history in terms of growth of productive forces. The productive forces, as already pointed out, consist of means of production, machines, tools, and factories, and labor power. The relations of production correspond to society's productive level. In addition to ancient feudal and bourgeois mode of production, Marx also talked of the Asiatic mode of production. On the one hand, Marx distinguishes between forces of production and relations of production. On the other, he distinguished between the base and the superstructure. For Marx, the productive forces are not objective economic forces which do not require the meditation of human consciousness for their emergence or existence. Likewise, the distinction between the material base and the ideological superstructure is not the distinction between matter and spirit, but between conscious human activity aimed at the creation and preservation of conditions of human life and human consciousness, which provide rationalization and legitimization of specific form that human activity takes. Like his dialectics, Marx constructed his materialist conception of history out of the Hegelian system itself, which had sought to bridge the gap between the rational and the actual. Marx, in fact, borrowed such concepts as civil society and property from the Hegelian system and set them in a revolutionary relationship to the concept of the state. Hegel confronts civil society as a sphere of materialism and counterposes it to the state as a sphere of idealism. In sharp contrast of this, Marx holds that the relations as well as forms of state are to be grasped neither from themselves nor from the so-called general development of human mind, but rather they have their roots in the material conditions of life. You must also understand the way in which Marx differentiates between his materialist conception of history and Hegelian idealist conception of history. To Hegel, it is the life process of human mind, that is, process of thinking, which under the name of idea gives momentum to history. Thus, for Hegel, the real world is only the external, phenomenal form of the idea, while for Marx, the ideal is nothing else than the material world, reflected by human mind and translated into forms of thoughts. To put it differently, while in the Hegelian scheme consciousness determines existence, in the Marxian scheme it is the social being that determines their consciousness. Thus, the relationship between economic and the political in Marx is such that the potential structure reflects the socio-economic conditions. It is the economic fact of life which produce or determine the nature of ideas. Thus, Marx reduced all thought and action to the material condition of life. Consciousness is nothing but the reflection of material conditions of man's existence. However, this relationship between material conditions and the ideas is not necessarily direct and automatic. It is rather complex. Marx expressed his position in a very technical language. He argued that the doctrine that men are products of circumstances and upbringing and that therefore changed men are products of other circumstances and changed upbringing forgets that it is men that changes circumstances and that educator himself needs education. The above statement of Marx will help you to understand that in Marx epistemology ceases to be merely a reflective theory of cognition, but becomes a vehicle for shaping and molding reality. Thus, Marx epistemology occupies a middle position between classical materialism and classical idealism, since it synthesizes the two traditions. It transcends the classical dichotomy between subject and object. In short, Marx denies the validity of traditional mechanistic materialist mode of consciousness. To Marx, reality is always human reality, not in the sense that man shapes nature, because this act of shaping nature also shapes man and his relations to other human beings. It is a total process, implying a constant interaction between subject and object. My relationship to my surroundings is my consciousness. In the subtle sense, the Marxian philosophy of historical materialism is different not only from Hegelian philosophy, it is also different from that of Feuerbach. While Feuerbach saw the unity of man and nature expressed by man's being a part of nature, Marx sees man as shaping nature and his being, in turn shaped by it. To put it in simple words, whereas Feuerbach naturalizes man, Marx humanizes nature. Marx argued that man not only satisfied his need through his contact with nature but also creates new needs as well as possibilities of their satisfaction. Thus, according to Marx, man's needs are historical, not naturalistic. The never ending dialectical pursuit of this creation and satisfaction constitutes the main course of historical development. Here again, the Marxist position is different from pragmatistics. While pragmatism starts with the premise that man adapts himself to a given pre-existing environment, Marx views man not adapting himself to the environment but shaping his world. To put it differently, reality is viewed by classical materialism and pragmatism as if it were merely a passive object of perception, while for Marx, reality is not only shaped by man, but it also reacts to man himself and shapes himself. Thus, it is a two-way interaction, man shaping nature and getting shaped by nature. Next is theory of class war. The understanding of the concept of class is central to the understanding of Marxian philosophy. The sole criteria on the basis of which the class of a person is determined is his ownership or control of means of production or land, capital, machines, and technology. Those who own or control the means of production constitute the bourgeois or exploitator, and those who own only labor power constitute the proletariat or exploited. Thus, classes are defined by Marx on the basis of twin criteria of a person's place in the mode of production and his consequent position in terms of relations of production. The lack of ownership or control of means of production and lack of property and the immediate need to get work, that is, the class of concrete labor, are some of the characteristic features of the proletariat class. Since class is based on ownership or control of means of production and ownership of product property, the disappearance of class difference depends on the disappearance of property as the determining factor of status. In Communist Manifesto, Marx Engels said, "The history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles." They argued that the class conflict is the real driving force of human history. In the capitalist societies, class differentiation is most clear. Class consciousness is more developed and class conflict is more acute. Thus, capitalism is the culminating point in the historical evolution of classes and class conflict. The distinctive feature of bourgeois epoch is the society as a whole is more and more splitting into two great hostile camps, into two great classes directly facing each other, bourgeois and proletariat. Marx also made a distinction between the objective fact of existence of a class and its subjective awareness about its being a class consciousness. Division of labor is the main source of historical emergence of classes and class antagonism. Each new class which puts itself in place of the one ruling before it is compelled merely in order to carry through its aims, to represent its interest as the common interest of all the members of society. The class making a revolution appears from the very beginning not as a class but as the representative of the whole society. Through a detailed historical analysis, Marx showed that no major antagonism disappears unless there emerges a new antagonism. Thus, general antagonism between the rich and the poor has always been there, but in capitalism it has been sharply polarized into antagonism between the capitalist and the proletariat. Thus, in capitalism, the emergence of proletariat has a special significance. It is not just a historical phenomena because its suffering, its exploitation, and its dehumanization is a paradigm for the human condition at large. This is so because in proletariat class, Marx sees the contemporary and the final realization of universality. He endows this class with a historical significance and mission. It can redeem itself only by a total redemption of humanity. When the proletariat announces the dissolution of the existing class based social order, it only declares the secret of its own existence because it is the effective dissolution of this order that will lead not only to the emancipation of the proletariat but to emancipation of humanity. For such emancipation of humanity, it is essential to abolish the institution of private property. Provide private property as private property as wealth is compelled to maintain itself and thereby its opposite, the proletariat in existence. The proletariat is compelled as proletariat to abolish itself and thereby its opposite, the condition for its existence. What makes it proletariat, that is private property. Emancipation of society from private property, from servitude takes the political form of emancipation of humanity as a whole. All human servitude is involved in the relation of the workers to production, and all types of servitude are only modification or consequence of this relation. Hence, the proletariat can abolish all classes and all classes antagonism by abolishing itself as a separate class. In final analysis, Marx visualized the emergence of a classless society. Such classless society will also be a stateless society because with the disappearance of classes, the very rationale for the existence of state will disappear. According to him, the rationale for the existence of state is to defend the interest of the bourgeoisie. Here we want to wind up this lecture. Thank you so much for your attention.